Hey everybody. Thanks for hopping on. Happy election day. It's always today's almost like I feel like a Super Bowl in some ways. Like we're like planning like a get together night, just like everybody watching TV, all the chaos. Who knows if we'll even know who the president is by the end of today. But let's dive in. So for today's session, as you saw in the invite here, it was all about the big five. We have the big five categories for content creation that we have found typically will be most attractive to your ideal families, and we're going to go through why that's the case. But before diving in, I just want to get a sense from everybody. When we talk about content, content can mean different things to different people. Is anybody here writing a blog or posting to a blog? Teresa, you are? Awesome. How's it going? How's the blog going? How often do
We
you
have
post
a
to it?
we have a goal to have 4 a month, and we hit 12 last month. So part of that
Nice.
is just submissions from people within the organization who are wanting to celebrate something, or maybe it's something about highlighting all of the elements of diversity that we should be celebrating over the course of a month. So there's one person who typically writes something. Then there's another person who typically writes about neurodiversity. So we are able to gain content from and we wrote our own curriculum for leadership, finance, and entrepreneurship. And so every week that team pulls together a blog to go out to families. I don't
Nice.
know to what extent it's read, and not everything is optimized, but it's content.
Okay. Well, that's great. Well, you certainly have the hard part done, which is the content creation itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's great. And how do you come up with this? Does everybody come up with their own topics, or do you have like a calendar where it's like, here are our topics that we're going to be covering?
There are, it's a bit a mix of a little. Sometimes, like, we'll accept anything that anyone wants to give us. It doesn't mean that we'll promote it as widely as we might promote something else that's more helpful to us. And then there are
Sure.
certain admissions pieces that are about, like, because we're pre-K through eighth, why a private school that ends at eighth grade? Why would that
Yeah.
be interesting? So that's a specifically admissions, and then we can use that to kind of push more. We can use that for some of our retargeting campaigns. So how we promote it also varies. And a lot of people just, for years, we've said, this is something that's important, and hey, people read them. And we celebrate at staff meetings that, 600 people read a blog, or we had page views over the course of an entire year that had 16 people reading that, and they get
Yeah.
excited about it. So they want to be able to contribute to it.
Awesome. That's great. Is anybody else blogging?
Well, if you would count it blogging, we have the Instagram, which is copies to the Facebook. It's not long read, but yeah.
And I was going to get to that next. Like that's the next form of content, right? Which is your social posts, right? So when we say, content can be your blog, content can be your social posts, um, content can be the email newsletters that go out, right? And so usually the conversation is around like, what do we write about, right? And sometimes I feel like there's a little bit of, I don't know if confusion, but sometimes when I ask about, hey, like, oh, we have like our school news, like what's happening at the school, and I would distinguish the difference between school news and a blog, right? So a blog is typically more thought leadership. School news is obviously campus experience, campus life, what's happening at the school, which can be very valuable, especially to prospective families who want to get an inside look at what what's happening at the school. But yeah, for today, I definitely want to draw that distinction when we start thinking about content. Oh, Teresa, thank you. Happy to take a look at that as well. That's great. 5 reasons to consider a private K-8 school in Denver. Love that. I'll share my screen just so everybody can kind of see. Right. Yeah, love this. Like this is great content. Thank you for sharing that, and we'll end up coming back to it as well. And so you said in terms of getting exposure to this, you said you're even running some ads to get people here.
Yes, for the we're using the 5 reasons to consider a private K-8 school in Denver, which is more optimized content. The rest of the content we encourage all our families to read and do a book study about on the anxious generation. So some of the
Yeah.
other content you'll see in here that's thought leadership is really related to like exploring the shifts in boyhood. That is really related to the anxious generation. We're doing a big civics week. So that's more of what you were talking about earlier, like what's something that's a school happening. It's just
Yeah.
so long. The content about that was so long. Then we link to it in our weekly newsletter. It gives us a landing page for some. So there's a mix of content in here. Guidelines for how to be appropriate in doing Halloween costumes. Got a little bit of everything in there.
It's like you never realize that you have to say this until something happens. You're like, I guess we should write about this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That is actually a piece of content that gets updated every single year.
Nice.
So because
Right. There's every year's new
we
costumes, new
yeah,
ideas.
we encourage people, especially with the election year this year, it was like, well, maybe stay away from certain things.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those out there. Um, okay, no, that's great. And so yeah, whether you have a blog or whether you're creating social media content, whether you're creating, email content, newsletter, there's always going to be the question of what should we write that certainly is going to be attractive to our ideal families, right? So you might feel like, hey, we should write for our current families, and that's going to probably be more like happenings at school. Sometimes we feel that social media is for our existing families, which to a degree it certainly is. But what about creating content for prospective families? How would that work? Especially if you haven't really dove in with both feet with content creation. And I wanted to share this. Has anybody seen me present this in the past? If so, type in a 1 if you've seen me present the family journey. Type in a 2 if you've never seen me present this. Tracy, have you seen it? Couple 2s. All right. So why don't I go through this briefly? Yeah, so a handful of folks have not seen this. Let's go into presenter view. Can everybody see this still? Everybody good? Okay. So when we think about the family journey, it's like, what are the steps that families go through to essentially identify a school that they, at the very least, want to inquire and apply to? And at the very least, take the next step to even just schedule a tour, right? So, step number 1 is awareness, right? How do they become aware that you exist? And that's when things like your advertising, your even social media, word of mouth, right? So they become aware that you exist. And what happens when they become aware that you exist? Then they're probably going to go to Google and search for like private schools near me, Montessori schools near me. They're going to see, if they can find you and, compare you to others, see where you're located on the map, right? Then they're going to take a look at reputation. And that's where they're going to take a look at your content, right? So what is that content? That's blog content, that's news articles, that's your social media. It's going to talk with friends and family, certainly included in there as well as are your reviews. And typically at this stage, we say this, the ZMOT. ZMOT stands for the zero moment of truth. That is a name that Google has given to this stage, this is the stage at which after they know who you are, they searched around for you on the search engines, they've taken a look at your reputation, your content, talk with friends and family, they're going to make a decision about whether they want to take that next step, which for schools is the conversion step. Yes, I am now willing to take some time out of my day to schedule a tour, to come to the open house, to pick up the phone and give you a call. But the most important part of this, and there's beyond this, right? They apply, they enroll, they have a great experience, and then hopefully influence the next person's decision. But when we look at this holistically, um, I think HubSpot did a study that said by the time they get to this conversion point, 70% of their mind is already kind of made up about where they're considering, because they can do so much research without you, right? Without talking to anybody in the school, without even coming on campus, right? They can understand exactly what's going on, certainly talk with friends and family. So they're doing all this research potentially to get their questions answered. So the point why we want to talk about content today is we need to influence these different stages of that parent journey, which I'll lump all of this into the research stage, right? They're doing a lot of research. So how do we influence their decision making? And one of the key ways that we do it is through content, your social content, your blog content, the content you put in your emails, that you sign up for a newsletter, the content, frankly, that's just on your website in general, right? So I didn't mention that earlier, but just the words, the videos that are on your website, it's content, right? So you don't necessarily need the blog to say, hey, we have content. Everybody's got a website. Everybody has words and videos on there. That is content. All of your content should typically fall into what I'm going to categorize today as the big five. The big five are helps answer the questions that are going on in a parent's mind. Let me see what else we have here. This was part of a presentation that that I did before. Let me go back, and then we talked about this story, and this is where I want to pull this from. So let's talk about a few things about what a blog isn't. Let's X out of here. So I do want to talk about this very briefly when we talk about blogging. There we go. So I do want to talk about blogging. Like I SEO is important, right? But I wouldn't necessarily blog for the purposes of SEO. I just want to point this out there. And this isn't a blogging presentation, but when we talk about content, I do want to talk about what blogging is and it isn't. I would say school news is not blogging. I think it's important for your newsletter, but school news necessarily isn't blogging. And we would say is, no old content. So Teresa, kind of like you mentioned, right? Make sure you're updating your content and it's fresh. So as we talk about content creation, these are just a few rules of thumb that I wanted to mention. That if you have maybe like what I see a lot of times is like, yeah, I have a blog, but we haven't updated it since like 2022. That's actually okay. That's fine. Just don't put the date on it, right? So somebody's looking like, oh, they haven't updated this in a while. Or just update it and say it's been updated for 2024, right? So here's the big thing I wanted to get to, which is when we think about creating content, we want to become obsessed with what your parents are thinking, right? What are they researching? What are they looking for? What are they trying to escape, right? Especially if they're coming from another school, they're not happy. Why do families choose your school versus others? Right? So we want to become obsessed with what they're thinking. Who are they? What drives their decision making? Why they should choose you? What are their objections? How are you different from your competitors, right? These are all things that we've talked about, right? Now, this isn't necessarily the big five, but we're kind of leading into it. So here's what I wanted to get to today. And I would love to talk about this and if we can all share examples of how you might be seeing this or using this. But here are really the five categories that when you look at your content, you're sitting down, you're saying, okay, we're going to create a calendar for social media. We're going to write some blog posts. Like what should go in there that's going to be attractive to your prospective families? And it really should come down to these five categories, because this is what families are looking for. And these are what their questions are and potential objections. First is cost, right? Why should I pay tuition? Many times we need to address that head on, right? Especially if you're, competing against a lot of other public schools. Why private versus public? So we're going to go into some examples too. Problems, right? We'll talk about, what are the problems they're looking, maybe it's getting lost in a school, right? What are the problems that families might be facing when it comes to their child and their happiness in the school? Comparisons, single sex versus co-ed, right? Montessori versus Waldorf. university model versus classical Christian, right? So depending upon maybe your area and the schools around you that families are comparing you to, having a comparisons article, a best of list. So we'll get into each one of these in a little bit more detail. But best of list, those are like your listicles, right? Um, 5 Montessori activities to do at home, right? Something like that. And then reviews. So reviews we can do in a variety of ways, but I think having parent reviews as content talking about their experience is great. And so we're going to go into some examples here. So let's talk about costs. Does anybody? Because I feel like this is the one that it's like, well, how do we address costs, right? And it's like, what do we want to say? How do we want to address it? And I think this is such an important one because when you look at your Google Analytics, one of the top 3 pages is likely your tuition page. And then what many times you'll find is they go to your tuition page and then they leave the site. They come there, like, how much does this cost? And then they leave. Totally common, very common for most schools. Your challenge is, how do we keep them on the page? How do we keep them engaged? One of the ways is to just address it. Do you feel that this is expensive? Here's why this is expensive. I wouldn't necessarily say even expensive, but I would say, um, is private school tuition worth it? How to afford a private school education? Maybe talk about financial aid, right? So here are some examples, and when we share this slide deck, you'll get a link to some articles. But here's a really great, and I have 2 images here because it's a pretty long article. How can I afford a private school for my child? Right. So especially if you look at your financial aid and maybe 30 to 40% of your families are on some sort of financial assistance, that's a good portion, right? So it's likely a piece of content that you want to make sure is out there, so that a family who's maybe considering, they're like, I'm not sure if I can afford this. And maybe you lose a handful of families just because they're making assumptions in their mind about whether they can afford it or not understand. Maybe they have no idea about financial aid or how it even works. Um, Writing content around that, I think, is extremely important. Has anybody written content like this? Hey, Theresa, you have. That's awesome. Let me make sure I'm not missing the chat. Hold on. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so Teresa, you put in 7 ways to pay for private school tuition. That's amazing. Love it. Love it. That's kind of a combo of this and the listicles. Um, so I love that. Out of curiosity, Teresa, do you know what your number 1 blog post is? Like, what's the most read?
No, I could easily pull it, but I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that'd be an interesting thing to take a look at. Because you wonder, okay, if something's the most read, well, why is that the case? Are people sharing it? Is it ranking well, in Google? Even though we say, hey, we don't necessarily need the right articles for SEO, because it's local, right? Unless you're a school that pulls nationally, the SEO is not as important, though it's nice. But we typically want to focus on more along the lines of these 5 categories. All right, so let's take a look what else we've got. I don't know if you could see it, but this one was, can you afford a private school education? So another kind of twist on that. And Teresa, there was a question. I know you had answered it briefly at Bev. I'm not sure if you were on. Teresa, can you describe real quick about who is creating your content?
That one I did. And it just depends on we get a lot of contributions from other people within the organization. So we're very fortunate that way. And it just depends on how important the content is. So I'm gonna know that I'm going to be closer to the content that's related to admissions. The academic stuff, I'm going to ask for our team to be a little bit more helpful, but I don't know if that answers your question. That's a simple answer.
Yeah, that's great. And certainly today we'll also talk about, incorporating Chat GPT, right? If you're on here and listening or watching this recording, it's like you're the sole content creator, right? And maybe you have other contributors, maybe you don't. How we can utilize Chat GPT. to help us. By the way, has anybody tried the new Chat GPT? It's called Chat GPT. So it's GPT 4.0 or 4.0 plus Canvas. It's awesome for content creation. We'll hop in at the end because what it allows you to do, I'll make a quick side note, especially for anybody that has to jump off. I want to highlight here why you should try that. If you want to create content now, the Canvas is, you have to use it. So if you were to just to go say, hey, write me a blog post, not the greatest prompt, but you write a blog post and it gives you content. Maybe you want to expand on a section. Like, I want more detail here. Well, what you would have to typically do is give it another prompt. Hey, this is pretty good, but can you make this longer? Can you describe this? Instead of having it go rewrite, you can actually click into the section now. It's almost just like a canvas. You click into that section. So imagine this was the article. I don't know if you could see this, but you see how it says like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the on this image here. Imagine you put this was the what ChatGPT produced. You could go and click on number 1 and say, hey, could you expand on this? And it'll just expand it right there for you. Hey, make it shorter, make it longer. So the new Canvas, ChatGPT version, I think works out perfectly for the conversation that we're having today about content creation. So if we have some time at the end, we'll hop in there and take a look. All right, so that is category number 1, which is if you're going to create content for prospective families, let's address cost head on. Why is private school expensive? How do I afford private school? Let's address those head on. Any questions there? Oh, hey, Renee, just so you popped on.
Hi, sorry I'm late, but
All right, now let's address, we'll call it problems. When I say problems, and that may not be the best title for this section, but it's, these are concerns, questions that, really concerns and objections that families might have as they're looking for a school, right? So it can be something even kind of, I saw a really great article about how to survive freshman year, right? So this might just put some families at ease about, that transition from 8th grade to 9th grade. So I'll talk about this one here in a second. I thought this was really well done about how they did it. This was really creative. How to help teens with ADHD, what is selective mutism, navigating college admissions. So, these are, especially like this one, how to navigate college admissions during a pandemic. Like that was such a big topic, I remember, during the pandemic, was like, hey, we can't visit colleges. We can't do those one-on-one interviews. How do we navigate that process? So if you're creating content that addresses that, you're providing tremendous amount of value. You're answering a question. Then obviously you can lead into how you help families prep for how to help students and families prep for college, right? So addressing some problems. So let's see what we have here, right? And I provide you with links to these articles in here so that you can go and read these. And I'll mention the freshman survival guide. Did I have that in here? No. The freshman survival guide I thought was really interesting about how this one school did it. And what they did was they went to their existing high schoolers, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, and they just said, hey, what's your advice to an incoming 9th grader about how to survive freshman year, right? And it was like, give us one tip, right? So if you get 5, 6, 7 students to just give you one tip, you combine those, you could put them into an article, a downloadable guide. I actually think that's a really great way to create content, by the way. If you ever struggle to create content, in addition to using ChatGPT, is to interview or survey faculty, students, alumni, ask them one question. They give you one answer back, and it's your job to just compile it. Because sometimes it can be very difficult. Like, yeah, I would love my teachers to contribute. And you go to a teacher and be like, hey, we would love for you to write a blog article. Maybe you get that teacher who just loves writing and gets it, and they're going to write articles for you. If you have those teachers, God bless you. That's fantastic to have them on staff. Many schools that I talk to say, yeah, we ask and people say they're going to do it, but it's not consistent. We don't get it a lot. And so having what I call like curating content is or interviewing or interview style content. I'll share exactly how to do that. That can be a really great way to create content like that freshman survival guide. But again, think about what are those questions that families have as you're giving them tours, as they call in and they have questions. So one of the things I'm going to recommend, and I probably should have mentioned this ahead of time, is just do a brain dump, right? If you're on here and you're not on the admissions side, talk with your admissions team and say, hey, what are those questions that every parent is just asking on every tour? All right, so we need to create content around that. We typically can't wait for them to ask that question during a tour. You want to create content around that because if they have those questions, then a million other families have those questions as well. Next category are comparisons.
Wait, can I was
Yeah,
looking for like raise a hand. I just wanted to mention something that's clicking for me is
yeah,
as you were talking about this, one of the toughest things for us right now is trying to target specific grade levels. And
mm,
the way that you have positioned this, it feels like that's a great strategy that would enable us to give to be able to target specific grade level content to help nurture those folks through the funnel so that we're getting more leads in fourth grade, for example, because it's not a normal year for kids to
Right.
transition, but it
yeah.
can be a way for us if we're targeting specifically to fourth grade, a precise type of content. So thank you. That was um, a really good tip that you
So
offered.
can I ask
Point.
can I ask a question to that, Clint? So Teresa, when you think of that, would you be interviewing fourth graders or parents of fourth graders talking about the fourth grade experience or teachers? Is that what you're
Probably,
thinking? Okay.
probably. And we're working right now to create a group of middle school students that are going to help
Hmm.
us generate content. And so we can
Yeah.
actually have them do certain things of like highlighting what's the coolest thing about, 5 things you love about fourth grade.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Because Montessori, it's really hard to get the kindergartners to go into elementary. So I like your comment there. So we could get the lower L parents or kids to talk about why they love elementary Montessori.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
I saw another school that they they by asking their teachers, I think the question was like, what's your favorite, what's one inspirational thing that you set up in your classroom every year? Something along those lines. But I was thinking, as you mentioned, like going into first grade, you can even ask the teachers like, what's your favorite thing about your first grade classroom? Something that would like get the kids excited,
Hmm.
or the families excited. So again, going back to, uh, you know, a way to get content is if you just ask one question to your faculty and let them give you just an email answer back with just 4 sentences. You get five faculty members that give you an answer back. You've got an article now,
That's right.
and yeah, and one other thing I wanted to mention about this, especially when it comes to grade specific, a campaign that I've run in the past that I've seen work really well. It wasn't so much a blog article, but the content was like a downloadable guide, and it was why switch. 4 reasons why you might be ready to switch schools, and that's effective if you're looking, especially like I remember we did that initially for a school that said they were looking for more middle school students. So middle school is another place where it's not the easiest thing to get a seventh grader, right, or somebody to come into eighth grade. Um, so how do you attract middle schoolers or even elementary schools? Well, they would have to switch schools. So you could create content around, here's why here's 4 reasons why your child might be ready to switch schools, and then the next part of that is if you have families that have switched schools, you can use their content, their testimonials. Like, yeah, this was our experience here. We switched, and best decision of our life, right? So you can start tying the testimonials in, which obviously leads into why to choose your school.
Hmm.
Any other ideas or questions related to, we'll say, the problems or this type of content? Let's get into comparisons. So comparisons are great too. Because I feel like this is one that comes up frequently. Again, I use my daughter's school as an example. I think Teresa, you had mentioned it, which is the why go up to 8th grade versus 12th grade, that comparison. Why choose a school that goes up to 8th grade versus 12th grade? All boys versus all girls, or not all boys versus all girls. That one's obvious. All boys or all girls versus co-ed. Because I've seen this one, like why boys and girls learn better together in the co-ed elementary school, right? I think this school they actually had single sex high school, but it was co-ed through elementary and middle. And the difference between public versus private school, I think that's a good one to address as well. Let me see if we have some examples. Yep. So we have some examples in here so that you can read these articles. But again, comparisons. We had one school, they actually created an infographic. So again, another form of content where it was which educational approach is right for you. And it was Montessori, it was Waldorf, and they had a third one, and I'm drawing a blank, but there was a third one. And it was a really good piece of content. And it was just very matter of fact information. And it was like, if you're looking, it broke it down into multiple categories. I'll have to go find it. Broke it down the categories and say, okay, here's the Montessori approach, here's the Waldorf approach, here's the third approach, if I can remember what that is. And it was really great, just informational content. So you could do something like that as well. I've seen that done with like immersion schools, like what's the best way to learn a language? Full immersion, and they had a couple other options there when it comes to immersion schools. But yeah, comparison articles are great. Any good examples of comparisons or any ideas?
I have one.
Yeah.
Montessori has one out about how you compare the kindergarten year in Montessori and public. And it's got,
Ooh,
I think it would be really awesome to do that. I really like what you're talking about here.
that's great.
And then also there's another article, a glimpse at the elementary program in Montessori, because people just don't think Montessori goes into elementary. They're all stuck that it's a preschool, people who aren't exposed.
Yeah.
So I know everyone is in Montessori, but I am.
But that's a good point, because especially with Montessori, right? There's probably a lot of preconceived notions about
That's right.
Montessori, right? So, and Renee, I'm not sure if you hopped on when we were talking about this, which is the parent journey and all the research that they're doing before they even talk to somebody at school. And during that
Yeah.
research phase, they might have formed their own opinions already, their own objections, questions, right? So it's
You're
like, how do
absolutely
we,
right, Clint. I think a
yeah,
whole bunch of people have formed opinions going, oh, Montessori, that's not good. That's not the kind of school I want to go to. And they don't even know what it is,
right.
for my child.
Yeah, I even think about Newgate, right? Tim's school, where they go up to 12th grade, right? So you might
That's
not even
right.
think
That's right.
about a Montessori high school. So they have even
Right.
more objections to potentially overcome, or just questions, or ways to educate the marketplace about your
Mm-hmm.
educational approach, and addressing those questions and objections potentially head on.
Yeah, and it's actually, I don't mean to correct you, but it's not a new educational approach. It's the oldest one.
Oh, exactly right. Exactly
Montessori's
right.
over 100 years old and it hasn't changed, This is kind of funny.
Yeah, and to that end, right, it's thinking about who are those families that, using Montessori as an example, are they looking
Right.
for a Montessori? And then it's like, okay, I got to choose which Montessori school is right for me, versus, hey, I'm looking at a variety of different options. Which one is
Yep.
best for, should I choose Montessori versus more
Yep.
traditional? Yeah.
Yep. And then there's also, if there's Montessorians on this call webinar, the whole concept of public Montessori, it's growing rapidly.
Interesting.
So it could be, it doesn't always have to be a private school.
Yeah.
So you could do something on Montessori public. Yeah. Anyway, that's great.
Good stuff, everybody. Let's move right along. The best of lists. These are like your old BuzzFeed style listicle articles that were always so popular, which is like the top 3 books to read over the summer, right?
Mm-hmm.
3 benefits of a private faith-based education, 12 Montessori toys to help your child learn through play. Yeah, so it's those lists. And what you'll find is, I think, Tracy, you had a great example, which was the 7 ways to afford a private school. That's a combo of both, you don't have to be exclusively one versus the
Yep.
other. But yeah, so people love lists. typically these types of articles are usually the most read because everybody loves lists. You put a number in front of something, it's like it instantly would get it read. You know, if you had a list of articles and one was like Montessori toys to help your child learn through play versus 12 Montessori, the 12 is going to win every single time.
Oh,
So
that's
best of
interesting. Do you also promote that you put that little comment in about how many minutes it takes to read it?
Oh, like at the like a 5 minute
I've seen
read.
that a lot on LinkedIn, and I actually read more articles because it says 2 to 3 minutes. And I say I can read this.
Yeah. That's definitely becoming more popular, especially
Yep.
across various website platforms.
Hmm.
That used to be, I feel like HubSpot, I don't want to say they did or didn't. I mean, HubSpot's always been at the forefront of content marketing and their
Yep.
platform. I feel like they might have been one of the first ones to do that.
Hmm.
But certainly a lot more have done that. And yeah, I personally like it. I don't have a lot of great data. I don't have any data to say, yes, the moment you put on there, it's a 4 minute read that's going to improve how often it gets read. However,
Hmm.
anecdotally, I would agree with you, Renee. Like when I see, yeah, it's a 3 minute read, like, yeah, I'll read, I'll take 3 minutes.
I feel like
Yep.
that would be fun to test in a newsletter, to
Yeah.
A/B test a version of an admissions newsletter or a
I
regular
was thinking
newsletter
this. Yeah,
that
that's
Brilliant
awesome.
idea.
says how long the article is against one that doesn't have that.
Yep.
Hmm.
Brilliant idea.
It's definitely impacted me because I don't feel like I have much time when I'm browsing. And when it says 2 or 3 minutes, I open it up and I read it.
That's a great idea.
And I think we know people don't want to do a lot of reading anymore. So if we know it's only minutes versus 8 or 9 minutes, right?
Yep.
I don't know. Kind of funny.
All right. So yeah, here's again, these are links to articles to show examples. And we'll come into the last one, which is we'll call reviews, social proof. Um, obviously family, this kind of leads into the concept of the portrait of a graduate, right? Which is like, who's my child going to become? What are they going to experience? So creating content around alumni spotlights, where are they now? Why I switched from public to private, using testimonials, highlighting. I've seen some of the what I have access to a lot of Google Analytics accounts for schools, and probably faculty articles and faculty social media posts tend to actually perform of some of the best. When you highlight a faculty or interview faculty members, they just perform so well. And it's not a surprise because I've seen parent survey data about why families choose private schools, and two of the top three reasons have to do with faculty. And so if you can create content around your faculty, whether it's your social media, whether that's an interview highlighting them in your blog or on your website, that's fantastic. Let me see if we have some examples here. Yeah, so this was an interesting article, taking time to say thank you. It was more images than articles, but it was different people at the school saying thank you to the school for their experience. I thought that was a really interesting approach to an article.
Hmm.
And again, I know we're talking about articles, but all of the same concepts apply to social media. And I think what we talked about during last session, for those I remember, we were talking about like evergreen content that you can post on social media.
Yeah. Hmm.
All of this content that we're talking here is, you could post about any of this and it makes sense on social media too, especially alumni spotlights, interviews, things like that. So everybody, that's your big five. So the next time you're going to sit down, and there's a few more slides that we'll get to just about how to create it. But what I would say is the next time you're going to sit down and you're saying, okay, maybe we're going to write a blog post, or we're going to post on social media, or we're going to create some content for a newsletter, or frankly, we're going to create content for our website, maybe your tuition page. Think about, does this piece of content fall into one of these five categories? And if it doesn't, you should really think twice about, why are we writing this article? What is the real benefit to creating this content? Because if you keep it in these five categories, it's giving you the best shot that it's going to resonate with the families you're looking to target, that perfect fit, that perfect match family. Anybody have any other ideas, just out of curiosity, of different categories that maybe that we didn't talk about here that?
I'll say part of the reason that we include some of the content we include that's submitted by that might not necessarily deal with one of these topics is that we are in a fairly homogeneous, affluent suburb of Denver. And when it comes to if our goal is full and diverse enrollment, then creating that space where it feels like we're creating a sense of belonging for people. So I think it kind of addresses a problem, but it creates an optics, it creates an opportunity for us to say, hey, we're focused on creating a sense of belonging for people. And when people ask, well, you know, it used to be, I'll say, when I first started at the school 5 years ago, people would tour and they would actively say, it looks like a bunch of white kids. And over the course of the last 5 years, I think we've done a lot of work in that area to try and create a sense of more belonging. And this is just one way that that adds to it.
I think it's a great point. It kind of goes back to, right, if that's the sense that some people have, right, that's the question, or you know, that's something that might be going on in a parent's mind, even as they're doing their research, talking with friends and family. So when you say you've been addressing that over the past couple of years, is it through just the talk about some of the examples maybe that of how you address that? Because it can be, I feel like I've heard other schools say like, yeah, saying exactly what you said, but how do we write content around that? Like, how do we say like, no, like here's what we're really doing. Like, how have you found?
Yeah, well, I think it's an integrated approach. So it's not just on the blog, which
Yeah.
is important to a lot of us, that it doesn't feel like a check the box activity, but that it does feel like a sense of creating a sense of hospitality, maybe is a good word to use. So one thing is that we've had parents in the past who have kind of held our feet to the fire and said, hey, you wrote a blog about XYZ. Why not write a blog about ABC? And as a result, we kind of said, hey, that's a lot of blogging about content that doesn't really serve us it serves very niche portions of our current parents. And so it's really important for us to take a more holistic look. And so we've kind of shifted to saying, okay, it's October. What are all the things we're celebrating this month? And put them all in one. So it doesn't feel like we have to take our social media channel and celebrate every single holiday that's coming up, or if it's you know a month of celebration, then usually there might be a blog on that talks about this is the month that celebrates this certain population. So I guess that's part of it. And then also trying to be as authentic as possible, and where we can integrate the academic side. That's a little bit tougher because the people who are writing this are more, they might be a psychologist or a student learning specialist. And it's harder to get teachers to write content, but they do cool things like where they might integrate a number of different aspects of the social studies curriculum, and we want to focus on that. And so we'll write it and just ask them for permission to put it on their byline.
Love it. That's great. Anyone else have any questions about these categories, creating the content? We'll spend a couple minutes here talking about how to create this. Yeah, go ahead, Renee.
Hi, Clint. I just wanted to take off on what Theresa just said about that sense of belonging. And I'm wondering if we can create content. You know, when I talked about the Parents as Partners a couple weeks ago, and we reviewed the findings of the General Surgeon's report, the recent one that's called Parents Under Pressure. And so, you know, parents are our customers, right? So I wonder whether there's anything in one of these that we could do about creating some creative content to draw parents into the concept of like, come to our school and be part of a community that also supports parents as well as the children, parents and families. I wonder what anyone thinks about that. Because the general surgeon's report came out saying parents are under so much pressure about parenting, how to do it, about the world they're living in. You know, it's scary for all of us, right? Even today is the election day. Half of us, more than half, are anxious about what we're going to find out tonight, right? So we're living in this like crazy world that, and he says that parents are really worried about their kids. Are they going to be safe? You know, because school safety is not as safe as it used to be, right? And the economy, the racial things going on in the world, you know, parents need a place to, you said belong, Theresa, and I believe in that. And, you know, I just wonder, I'm thinking out loud that we could possibly do something about that that would be different than what other people are doing, right? Attracting parents to our community. But then you have to have some parent programming, but I think many of us do.
And do you already have a group of parents who are heavily involved that those could be the ones that you go to an interview and ask them about community? What do they enjoy about the community there? And then
Yes,
you
at
got your
Kingsley,
content created.
we got the parent association very involved in this. We didn't post this, but I'm thinking all that we learned from them, we could be posting that content now. It's not too late, you know? And it's an interesting angle, right? To focus to the parent, because we have to remember the parent is our customer before we get the child.
I totally agree about targeting the text towards parents. We do that. We are preschool.
Yep.
So we can't get really much content of that young
Yeah.
of kids. So we definitely target most of the post towards the parents and about handling different issues of that age. And out of the parenting support, we are holding events like parent education events about the age or a certain question. And also we are going to have a community picnic where parents can share about their business or the place of work, so they can network and like find clients or find support in the things that they do.
Yeah.
And it also has the secondary benefit. They're going to ask for donation from the businesses for our auction because we are non-profit.
Right, right. Because I think when you think about parents of all different ages, students of different ages, a parent of a toddler child who comes into a school when the child's like 2 years old, that means that parents only had that child in their life for 600 days, right? So they obviously need information. We need to find out what they need from them, you know, not assume that we know. But you know, when I ran a middle school, high school, those parents were eager to meet with me whenever I did coffees because they just wanted to come in and say, what's going on with the kids? You know, what do they do? What do they talk about? Because middle school don't communicate all that much with their parents, right? Anyway, I just think it's an interesting thing to pursue.
I think it's very interesting thing. I've been a parent of every age of the child. They're grown-ups now. Definitely public schools don't communicate much. It's like basically 3 times a year when there's parent-teacher conference, the end of the story. And I think this specific thing about the kids, especially having us Montessori educators, we know that development goes in stages. And to me, it's like, as soon as you know how to handle this age, it's over. The child is in a new stage and it's totally different person. You have no idea what's going on anymore.
And I think the parents have stages of development. You know, I mean, the parent of a toddler is different than the parent of a kindergartner, who's different than a parent of a middle schooler.
And
I don't know. I think we could target something.
I would add definitely a parent of 1 child, 2 kids, 3 kids at very different stages of being a parent as well.
Sure.
Well, I know we're approaching the hour. I mean, this is a great conversation and great ideas. Because content creation sometimes I feel like it's one of those things that it just feels like such a weight on our shoulders sometimes to get it created, especially if it's a
Hmm.
you feel like you're doing it yourself. Wanted to give you a couple ideas for if you like some of this content, you say, well, okay, how do I create it, right? Give you a couple ideas,
Hmm.
and then we'll obviously jump into Chat GPT here in a second for about how to create it. So this is the one I think I gave the wrong name earlier. One of my favorite ways is called the crowdsource post. That's where you ask one question to five faculty members, five alumni, five parents, whoever, right? You just say, here's the question. What's the number one, what's your favorite thing to do the first week of school? Right? Your favorite book to read over the summer? Or what should every student read over the summer? Or something like that. Have a have that person write one paragraph, and then you combine it into an article, a video, whatever it might be. And so another one that's similar to that is just an interview post, right? Maybe pick one faculty member a month to interview, and that interview becomes a great piece of content. One, again, we know from surveys that faculty is one of the big reasons that families choose a school, and that frankly they stay at a school, is that relationship with the faculty. So um, interview post is great. Again, interviewing faculty, interviewing alumni, interviewing your head of school. Um, then there's an FAQ post. So this is really, we talk about answering the questions that are going on in a parent's mind. You can put that all into a post, right? Here are the five
Hmm.
most common questions we get on our tours. Here are the five most common questions we get from families that are um, transitioning from kindergarten to first grade, right? Um, so I have a FAQ post, this a stats one. So if you find stats about, here are three amazing stats about why um, all girls is more beneficial than co-ed in high school, right? So finding stats around a topic, typically that takes a little more time to do that research. Frankly, you could probably use ChatGPT for that now. I think when I created this was even before ChatGPT, but obviously I added on that fifth one there, which is ChatGPT. So let me just hop in real quick to ChatGPT just to show you the new version, which is awesome. So if you go log in,
Hmm.
I think you have to have a paid version for this, or maybe it's limited, but it's GPT 4.0 with Canvas.
Yeah, you have to pay for the 4.0.
You have to pay for the 4.0. Okay.
Yeah, not the 3.5.
Well, the Canvas is great because I think it's really great for content creation. Now, there's a lot of things that we could do in here. We could, if you re, for anybody that was with us for building your custom GPT, right? First, we want to train. In the perfect world, we want to train Chat GPT and say, "Hey, I want to help me create content. It should fall within these five categories. Come up with five." Let's just do that, right? Um, let's go back into our. Let's see if we can do this very quickly, just to
Hmm.
give some examples. Okay. Um, Help me create blog content for a private school. So this is going to be a terrible prompt, but we're going to do it very quickly. Um, Help me come up with ideas to attract prospective families. All content ideas should fall into one of these five categories. Now, I would want to give examples of what each article would be. Let's see if it figures it out. Eh, you know what? Let's do
Yeah.
this. Sorry. Help me create. You know what? We're not going to do that. Let's just do this. I just wanted to show you this one thing. Write a blog post comparing private versus public. So let's let public school. Let's just see what that goes. This is not a great prompt. I would never recommend doing it that way. Ideally, I would go through and start training it on, here's who our school is, here's, the different elements of our curriculum. All right, so it wrote all of this. Cool, right? So here are the top 6 reasons. I would never do 6 reasons. Either do 5 or 3, 5, or 7 usually. So then what you could say is maybe you like this, right? And then what we would say is, please expand,
Mhm.
give, or maybe let's cite statistics and the source regarding the value of small class sizes, right? So we can now go into each section and modify it. So when we think about content creation now, ChatGPT was already amazing, right? It revolutionized it. And it's getting better and better. And I think one of the big obstacles that a lot of folks had when it came to ChatGPT was the content was too generic. I always had it wasn't necessarily saving me a lot of time. I kept prompting it again and again and again and again and again to try to find that ideal post. I think Theresa had to log off, and I'm not sure if she's still here, but yeah, Theresa, she was great. She had, for those that are or see the chat, Theresa has a great example of her blog. So grateful for her to be on here. But this is what we can do with the new Chat GPT version. Again, I get nothing out of it, but I would highly encourage you to spend the $20. Actually, I think they upped their price, frankly. I think it's $30 now to get the updated or the premium version of Chat GPT so that you have Canvas. And this is the big thing you could do now is you can hop into here. And there's probably even more that you can do that haven't even ventured into yet. But one of the things that I really like is being able to go into each section and make it better, include bullets, make it more visceral and bold. I don't even know what that's going to produce. Well, let's see what it does. Yeah. So anyway, we approach the end of the hour. I just wanted to again point you to this just to show you again what's possible. Because when we talk about content, usually there's 2 emotions that happen. It's like, that's great, this makes a lot of sense, but oh crap, I have to go create the content. How am I going to do that? It's going to take a lot of time. And so that's where, again, try to do some of these. Like one of the first things I always recommend is try to do one of those crowdsource posts and then start playing around with ChatGPT. Because once you really hone it in and you find some of those prompts that really work well for your style and for your school, you could just put that on repeat, and it can give you ideas. I think in here I also have some other ideas. So there's also some other ideas for content. Like as part of our software, we actually include all of this content, which is general articles that we recommended you brand for your school. But the long-term value of investing in private school education, why private school tuition is worth every penny, right? So these are some other ideas for different topics of content that you can write. Any questions? Looks like okay, everybody has to hop off. Thanks, Bev. Thanks, Sandy, for hopping on. Any other questions before we go? All right, everybody. Thanks for
Okay, see you
joining
next
again.
week.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. See everybody next week. Happy election day.
Bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.